What's up, Steelers fans? Welcome back to another episode of Around the Berg. I'm your host, Mitchell Wolf, here with my co-host, Shane Kubis. This week, we're going to have a bit of a cheerier episode, hopefully.
Yeah.
And we're going to kind of dive deep into the Steelers' salary cap situation, kind of see how it's affecting them this year, what they can do until the season begins, and then how it affects their plans for next season and beyond. In the meantime, Shane, I know you're a little bit under the weather, but otherwise, how you doing?
I'm feeling a little bit better now. Yeah. So,
Nice.
yeah, just kind of just antsy about the draft coming up. I think we're kind of all just waiting for that to happen. So we have some concrete things to talk about as far as changes to the team, since looks like we might not see much change between now and then. So,
Yeah, this is the time where, people are just getting antsy. So, people are itchy on their trigger finger with their takes and their
yep.
mock drafts, and
Always fun.
you get anonymous ex NFL ex New York Jets scouts putting their
Oh, yeah.
mock drafts on the TL.
Mm-hmm.
He's-
That's a fun one. Yeah. I don't want to give him any
No,
airtime, but
that's why I think I'm just. I think it's just that's just how I'm going to refer to him now on as the
yes,
ex NFL, the ex New York Jets scout.
that's how he wants to be referred as. So,
Yeah,
that's
the ex who was interviewing for GM jobs, and
right.
major
Yeah.
emphasis on the air
Interview.
quotes there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the whole thing. But we'll move on from that because I don't really
Mhm.
want to talk about him anymore. So
If you know, you know. So, yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I wanted to get into this last week, but obviously, more important stuff came up. So now
Yes.
we're going to get into it. So as the Steelers stand right now, they have about $14 million in cap space. And that's depending on where you look. You can look at Spot Rack or over the cap. It's right around 14 million in terms of if you want to average the two numbers out. That's the top 51, which is that's the generally expected number for the top 51 most valuable contracts, because obviously some of these contracts are going to cut in preseason, all that. See money moves around, but so we'll operate with that $14 million
Right.
being the number right now. And as of right now, they only have $26 million in dead cap
Right.
for this season. And next season they have no dead cap, and they're projected to have between 58 and 76 million cap space. Now, I don't know why the number jumps up so much in terms of the difference between the two sites. Their numbers are so different. But the point is they have a lot of money next year.
Right. Yeah. Either way, like no matter how you look at it, they're gonna have a lot of flexibility for sure.
Yeah, I really don't know why there's. I mean, they might. I even looked, like, I think they're both assuming the same like cap. One might have the projected cap numbers a lot higher because they're kind of
Maybe.
projecting the growth of the cap on a year-to-year basis, or the other might
True.
just have a more conservative estimate. So that might be why. But the point is, Steelers are going to have a lot of money off the books next year. So
Right.
that's kind of why I wanted to get into this, to see like how are their moves this year going to affect, or how are those moves affected this year, or how are they affected by next year's cap space.
Right.
But the big move that still is kind of out there is them bringing in a strong safety, because they haven't signed Terrell Edmonds. The market's kind of drying up. We've seen Ronnie Stanley get a deal. There's another safety that just signed recently, I thought.
I know
Dream Jackson.
That's right. Yeah.
Re-signed
He
with
came
the
back
Broncos.
Yep.
And he was apparently, Steelers brought him in for a visit.
Yeah.
So, they're kind of kicking the tires on a lot of people, but Matthew and Edmonds are still out there. So they're two biggest targets, if you will.
Yeah. And the thing that's interesting for me at this point is the fact that Edmonds still hasn't signed anywhere is telling me either he's not getting any offers that he feels is worth what he's showed so far, and he's looking for hopefully someone after the draft who didn't get safety help to give him a better deal, or the Steelers haven't given him any serious contract offers yet. One of the or a combination of those two.
I think it is. I think it's the former. I
Yeah.
think that they have given him a number and said, like, hey, like, this is what we can do right now.
Right.
And, once we get through the draft, we'll have a better feel on what that number is. And, I have to assume that they're going to approach this draft assuming that they can't get Evans back, so they will most likely draft a successor. But even if they do spend a first, a second, or third round pick on Edmonds, I would not say that completely excludes them from bringing him back.
Yeah, it doesn't. I think especially if they take a guy who maybe could fill the type of role he filled, but
Like a
maybe
Lewis
not
Cine
yet.
or a
Yeah, somebody like
Kyle
that.
Hamilton.
Even like if they wait later, like I had in a mock I did recently, I had Nick Cross in the third round.
I was doing one as well, and I had Brian Cook in the third.
Right. So like again, somebody in that mold of like a second, third round type of player
Yeah.
who probably isn't ready to be a full-time starter week
Mhm.
one, or at least not a good starter week one.
Yeah, I say
But
good start
has
because they're gonna play.
right, but like they're gonna have some qualities that they like from the safety position. But if you bring Edmonds back, it just allows you to develop that player a little bit more. And then if Edmonds doesn't continue to get better or whatever, then you can move on from him then again.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
they did sign Carl Joseph back, which is
right.
mostly a
Which
depth signing, but,
yeah,
like,
I don't.
the guy's a former first-round pick and, like, started for multiple seasons, so,
Yeah,
if
he has
worst comes to
talent, but yeah,
yeah, like, if worst comes to worst, like, let's say they, like, draft a safety and that guy gets, like, a little nicked up in the preseason, so,
right.
like, we can't but, like, I think you could it wouldn't be great, but, like, you could start Carl Joseph for, like, 2 weeks and maybe it won't be
Yeah,
awful.
he's capable of
Yeah.
taking snap. It's not like he's a guy that you can't put on the field outside of like a couple specific situations. Like he has the experience to go out there and play. It's just not who you're hoping it's going to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
Yeah, so, the situation isn't dire yet, but, I
no.
mean, I think that Matthew is still gonna end up being too expensive, even though he
Yeah.
has come out and said, "I'm not necessarily looking to, like, make a ton of money on this contract, like, I wanna win more than anything." So one could say that might keep the Steelers out of it, but he has
Yeah.
mentioned playing for Mike Tomlin a few times as well.
I think what it comes with him, I think, like you said, money is not his biggest factor, but like he mentioned, he would have taken the deal that the Chiefs offered to I can't remember, Justin
Justin
Reed, right?
Reed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which that was what, like 10 and a half, 11-ish million, I think. It was 30
Yeah, I'll
three
look
years,
it up.
31 and a half. Which yeah, that's definitely below market value for him, regardless. I know it was around that range.
Mhm.
So do I think that another team is going to be able to offer that to him and he'll take that? No, because I think he wanted to go back to the Chiefs, which is why he would have
Mhm.
taken it. But I wouldn't be surprised if the number's a little bit lower than maybe it probably could or should be, depending on if the team that he wants to go to really, if he really wants to be there. Like, if he really wanted to be with the Steelers, would he take a couple million less for over 2 or 3 years? Maybe. But
Mhm.
it's still going to be something where they would have to push a lot of money in that contract into 2023 and 24, which they have the
Yeah,
space to do, but
true.
that's a lot of money that they're then throwing down the road a little bit. And it's not something this team really likes to do a lot. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's the thing with Matthews, like, his average deal, like, it's projected at over 15,000,000 a
Right.
year, which, if they spread that out, like, they could have that 10, this year and then, 20 next year or something, or
Right.
spread it out over 3 years, but that's I think they'd be a little concerned about that, especially for I mean, Tyrann Matthews has been an incredible player for a long time, but, like,
Yeah.
he is undersized, he's an older player,
Yes.
he'd
Yeah.
be learning a new system, so there's a lot of unknowns or variables that, might not go his way, so you kind of might want to go with more of a quote sure thing at Edmonds. Granted, his ceiling is lower, and his floor might
Right.
be lower as well, but still,
But he
um,
does. How do you? We don't have to worry about how he projects. You're right. Like
exactly.
that's the thing about it. That is it worth that extra 4, 5, $6 million a year possibly
Mhm.
for a who could be a possible upgrade, but maybe only for a year at most or two.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's why I like the I've always been a big fan of bringing Edmonds
Me
back
too.
because
Yeah.
you get him for at least like 2/3, maybe half of the price of Matthew,
Probably. Yeah.
um, and I think that what will happen is that he will not be signed until after the draft, and at that point, his leverage is with relation to the Steelers, it's probably the lowest it could be, assuming
Yeah.
they do draft a safety. If
Hmm.
they don't, then he has great leverage, and they
Yeah.
still have room to sign him for a bigger deal. I
Exactly.
think they
Yeah.
just kind of want to have more. They want to have more questions answered on their end before they commit X amount of money to him, which I
Right.
think is fair for both
That's
sides,
fair. It's
honestly.
fair. It is. So yeah.
Um, and yeah, I'm still a big fan of bringing him back. So some of the other contracts in the future, which there's been a lot of talk about Deontay Johnson as of late,
Yes. Yeah.
because there was just the report today that a lot of the top receivers in uh, the same draft class as him, right? Am I counting that right?
Yeah.
Okay,
I believe so. Yeah.
so the AJ Browns, DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, all those guys. I
Yeah.
think McLaurin's not doing it, but they are all exploring sitting out the OTA period until they get new deals because now the wide
Right.
receiver market is booming.
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem with I think this whole conversation, right? Is a lot all these guys are more than worth a second contract to me. But at the amount of money that these guys are getting paid right now, a lot of these teams, like especially like if you're Washington, are they in a position right now to want to commit that much money to one player, especially at receiver right now? As good as he's been for them. I don't
Yeah.
know if they're really in a position to spend that much money on just a receiver. Like they're not really competing right now. At least it doesn't feel like that. I mean, the defense could show up again like it did 2 years ago, and they could be a wild cardish team, but it's tough right now with that division.
Yeah, and McLaurin is for him at least relative to the other ones, he's interesting because since he's a rookie, like he's been such an important leader in that locker room.
Yes,
Like
yeah.
he's been a captain since he was a rookie, which is pretty unique.
With that culture, though, I
And
mean, it's not surprising.
yeah,
Before that,
well,
yeah,
I mean that's almost more impressive. Is like
yeah, because
you took
yeah,
charge of this team that has been
hmm
in the you know bathroom
yeah,
for a long time, and like you've been
so
the guy,
yeah,
despite having a ton of quarterback turnover and just being a dumpster fire of a franchise. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously the Christian Kirk deal that's crazy, with an average value of 18 million per year, with
yeah,
signing bonuses in the 20 millions. So you know, for those guys are all clear, defined, wide receiver ones in the NFL.
yeah,
The case with Deontay Johnson's a little different because in terms of like target share and all that, he's definitely been a wide receiver one for the Steelers last
yes,
few seasons. The problem is he does have those production lapses where he has those drop issues, which I think, again, for the most part, I think has been cleaned up. There are just a few
yeah.
games a year where he
It seems like
just
just a
loses his
couple games.
mind. And like, if you talk to anybody who was around the team, who was close to the team in terms of from media or team perspective, they said like this guy was working his
hmm
butt off to get that issue fixed. Like he was always first on the field practicing stuff. You know, it's not like a hand like an actual hand issue.
No,
It's not like a not wanting to fix it issue. It's just like sometimes his brain just breaks. It's just like a
it
pitcher.
yeah.
It's like a pitcher who can't throw to first sometimes, like John
It's that
Lester.
yips type of thing, and
Yeah.
I think with him, like the thing that's so interesting about it is because it is a mental thing, it only really shows up occasionally, which is why
Hmm.
it's so like it's hard to project. Like, is that something that is ever going to go away, or is it
Yeah.
something you kind of have to expect might happen from time to time? And obviously, that doesn't make him all of a sudden like a guy that's not worth getting paid, but it does make you pause a little bit more than maybe you would just looking at his production and what he's done for the offense for the past 2 years. So.
And the other thing is that if you think about it, he's never really had a normal year of quarterbacking
No,
because
not
his first
normal.
year
No.
on the team, it was the 19 year where he had Mason and Hodges
Yeah,
and
just yeah.
everybody. In 2020, Ben was there and he was fine, but he wasn't certainly one of
No,
his best. And last
it
year,
wasn't
obviously, he
Ben.
was
No,
a shell of himself.
right.
So, he's still put up like I think he was 1,000 yard receiver 2 years ago. If not, he was really close, right?
Yeah, I believe he. I think he's coming off of two straight thousand
Yeah,
or close to it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and again, having those bad games. So, he's still been extremely productive.
hmm
So, and I get like he's not like a size or speed freak like DK Metcalf or anything like that. He's just a very good route runner, good after the catch, and when his brain is there, he's got good hands.
Yeah.
So, I think there's reason to be like concerned about not giving him that huge deal. And the problem is like if the Steelers don't really give him the deal he wants, somebody else probably will.
And that's kind of the key thing too, is we know looking at what Kirk got this year,
Mhm.
right? And that's kind of the contract everybody's looking at is like, this kind of broke the receiver market. And to a degree, I think it did, but it is also a contract that's structured in a way where it's really a 2 year, like 37, I think, $1 million deal. In all reality, like that's what it can be. But that's still $18.5 million a year for 2 years. So it's still, I mean, he's setting the receiver market as like if you are a good number two, even a high number three type of receiver, you can get this type of money on the open market if you make it there.
Yeah, you're
And
absolutely right.
that does not set a good precedent for teams looking to upgrade a receiver not through the draft. Like it's kind of becoming an issue where, and this also doesn't help that receivers have been pretty plentiful in the drafts the past couple of years. It is making it seem like some teams are going to start doing what the Packers did with Adams and what the Chiefs did with Hill, where they're not going to pay that monster receiver contract because they don't think it's worth it.
Well, so I'll push back a little because the Packers
Okay,
were willing to pay it.
that's true too. Yeah, that was also a situation where it felt like
Yeah.
Adams just kind of was like, I don't want to play
Yeah,
for you
and but
anymore.
but your I
Yeah,
think your general point it
right.
still
Yeah,
stands. Like there's always gonna be a team that's gonna be willing to pay that number. And I think your point about like the receiver draft class every year is always super deep now.
yeah,
And like
feels
you
like
can
it, yeah,
just find talent everywhere. Like that's why like I'm kind of starting to move towards like a quote receivers don't matter in the draft. Like
yeah,
I honestly think like unless they have one like truly unique, it's mostly physical trait. So like a speed, and then like a size with the requisite athleticism. I'm probably not going to draft. I don't really want to draft them in the first round because I can get that value later and get a draft position in the first round, like an edge rusher, an offensive tackle. That there's going to be a bigger drop off if you wait, a few rounds. So
And the
in
Steelers have
this,
kind of proved that over the years too.
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
they've taken that model before anyone probably else really felt the need to do so. They've just been very good at identifying guys that do exactly what they want them to do within the confines of the offense. And I mean, Johnson was a third round pick.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, and look how much he's produced. Like, it matters more about one, the fit, obviously, and also just your skill set. Like, can you be that route runner guy with Johnson's case? Can you be the big body, speed, height threshold guy with like Chase Claypool?
Hmm.
It's that type of stuff, and you can find those guys later because they do have some things that they're not elite at or the greatest at, but it doesn't matter if you build a cohesive receiver unit around
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So,
Like I like in my mind, like I'm never like I would very rarely draft a receiver in the first round if he is like not a complete, because like a lot of the
mhm.
receivers in the first round of this year's draft, like they kind of all have discernible flaws. Like
Yes,
if
yeah,
you think about Chris Olave, like not great after the catch, not really
no,
great in contested catch
not a lot
situations.
of strength in general. Yeah, just
Right.
not very good tackle
Garrett
breaker. Yeah.
Wilson, his route running is a little weird.
It's yeah, that's probably the best way to
Yeah.
describe it is it's
And
just
like
weird,
I
yeah.
know he tests his straight line testing was very good, but I didn't really see that on film.
No, he doesn't feel like a true burner on the
Right.
field at all. So
Like,
it's
and then
yeah.
like Drake London like doesn't really separate, doesn't necessarily need to, but like again,
No,
like I
but
want that perfect prospect in the first round of the receiver.
right.
Traylon Burks obviously didn't test well in terms of the traditional receiver stuff.
Yeah.
And James Williams has injuries, so that's another thing. So,
Yeah.
but my point is that like if you don't have that perfect prospect, I wouldn't take in the first round because you can find guys that they have those flaws, but like you can just take them later and
Sure.
get better
Yeah.
value for it. But anyways,
Okay.
I digress. So yeah, I think that they might treat Johnson kind of like they're treating Edmonds. Honestly, like there isn't that option for it, but I think they'll let this year play out, and I think they'll probably give him a decent offer. But I just don't think that they are going to dole out that kind of money to a guy that isn't really a dominant number one receiver
Right.
in a year where they are, I think, are either going to be in the second year of their rookie quarterback deal or they're drafting a rookie quarterback next year.
Right. One of the two. And I think too, like I was considering that maybe they would go the franchise tag route, but that tag is going to be monstrous now with some of the deals that have been signed. Like
That's a good
you're
point.
looking at
Yeah,
like I assume by the time it'd be getting placed, there might be 20 million or something like that, close to that per like for the franchise for receivers. Like, and at that point, like, would you rather just offer like a shorter deal that is closer to that number but not quite as high?
so okay, yeah. So the projected franchise tag for a wide receiver would be just over $20 million
Yeah,
next
exactly.
year.
So you're looking at paying him $20 million for a year, or could you get him to take a shorter deal that is lower value by a little bit, but does save you a little bit of money? Like
Mhm.
none of that really makes a lot of sense for them unless they committed to him. At that point, I would just commit to him.
Yeah.
So it's going to be tough. I mean, it
Yeah,
just
and like
depends.
maybe he really meshes well with Trubisky or whoever the
Yeah.
new quarterback is, and he's like, you know what, I still want like the 18, but like I'll stay for 18 instead of going somewhere else for 20,
Right.
or something
Right.
like that.
Exactly.
So I think that there's some merit to be had about, because like we said, they're gonna have a ton of money next year, so giving
They
him that
will.
big contract is probably fine. But I would rather them devote a lot of that money towards paying Minka Fitzpatrick.
Right. And that deal is, I mean, with the way that the safeties were paid this year, we're what at least probably like 18 million
Yeah,
a year, and
it's
that's probably the
the
floor.
safety market is exploding as well.
Right, like, especially for legitimately high-end safeties, like, those
Hmm.
guys can as much as I think the safety position is undervalued a little bit at this point, if you have an elite one or one that does what you need them to do to kinda make the defense work like Minka did for us this year
Hmm.
and should do in the future, they're gonna get their money.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, and honestly, the good news is like it is just starting to boom. So like next year, they could get in like at the perfect time
Yeah, I think it'll work out, yeah.
because so Jamal Adams is the highest in terms of average value and overall value. It looks like at
Yeah,
just under 18 million a year
right.
average. Kevin Byard and Marcus Williams are 14, Harrison Smith 16, Justin Simmons 15, Buda Baker just under 15, Eddie Jackson just under 15, Quandre Diggs
Mhm.
13. Then it drops off.
Yeah, pretty significantly.
There's a few guys at 11 and 10, and then a lot of guys under 10. So, I think we can all agree that Minka Fitzpatrick is a top five, probably a top three safety NFL. The franchise, honestly, if they wanted to franchise tag him, I mean, that's what the Bengals are doing with Jesse Bates, and
Yeah.
he's not going to report until they get him a deal because the deal for a safety next year on a franchise tag is only 14 million.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem. Is like it does put you in a bind because like the Bengals did it, I think, just to make sure that they have more time to
Yeah.
negotiate with him,
hmm
not to actually have him play on the tag. I
The
doubt.
original purpose of
Yeah,
the franchise tag.
right. So like that's the whole problem with it is they're I don't think they're going to take that route anyway. But even if
Yeah.
they did, like he's not going to play on that, and he
Yeah.
shouldn't realistically because it's not going to accurately represent his value
hmm
based on, and that's kind of the problem with it is starting caliber safeties are pretty much at about 10 million or less on average. If you're looking at like true like top 10-ish, top 15-ish safeties in the league, that's where you start getting into like 13, 14 plus million. And it's only those guys really. So that average is being weighed down by the amount of solid starters that aren't getting that money.
Yeah, and honestly, like I just found Spot Racks.
Hmm.
They're like market value for Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
It's a 4-year, $61 million deal.
That feels too
That's a bargain.
that feels way too
That's a
I
bargain
just
in
I
my
just don't
mind.
see that. Yeah. That would be like I'd love I mean if he could sign that today, that'd be awesome. But I don't see that happening. I don't think that would make sense for him. Um I don't know. Like it's going to be interesting to see how they try to structure that or what the deal ultimately looks like, but I'm expecting it to be at least 17 plus, at the
Oh yeah,
minimum.
I'm thinking 18.
Right. That's
I think
probably
he
where
could,
it starts
and
because
frankly, like again, like because they have that big expansive cap, and the cap I think next year is going to go up a lot higher, and I
I
think
think so too.
a big part of it is I think so. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the NFL's deal with DirecTV for Sunday Ticket expires very soon. Is
Yes, I
it this
believe so.
offseason or next offseason?
It's either it's one of the two. I want to say it's this off season,
Yeah,
but I'm not
because I saw
100%
something
sure.
about it today that like Apple TV is considering buying it.
Yes, I've heard that too.
So I just want
Which
to yeah. So after the 2022 season is when the
so it's
deal
after so it
expires.
is the after the
So
cap.
that's gonna happen. That might wait until next year, but the cap is gonna go up a lot because that's gonna be worth a lot of money.
It
So that's gonna
is,
kick
yeah.
the cap up a good bit for
I do
everybody.
think so. Yeah.
So signing Minka to a 16, 18 plus $1 million deal for like 4 or 5 years is I'm very much okay with that.
Yeah, try and honestly, like, and this kind of where the next year's money is going to be important. Like, shove
Yeah.
a lot of that money in that first year, man, and
Yeah.
just let it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
Because
this is like you are signing a TJ Watt level defender. Like
yeah,
please pay him his money.
yeah, get him on the like I said, get him figured out. Pay him whatever you need to pay him. Structure it however you need to structure it to make it work for you guys. But make sure it gets done because realistically, let's say Mitch plays relatively well if he's a starter and
I
it's
hope I
not a
do,
rookie.
honestly. It's
Yeah,
gonna be tough,
like
but
yeah, right. So you do that, you hope for that. If that doesn't work out, like you're still in a holding pattern for figuring out what the offense is actually going to be long term. Having the
mhm,
defense set for multiple years and
yeah.
giving you the ability to stay competitive because that's what this team ultimately cares about.
hmm
While finding your footing on offense is going to be really important, and without Minka back there, I don't see that happening. So
Yeah.
I'd like to make sure that stays where it is right now.
And in today's NFL, and like where really like the debate between pass rush and coverage mattering is like the debate. But when you
Yeah.
have at least aspects of both, and you have like a premier edge rusher, which is great, and especially in the prime of his career, you have a great interior defender who is kind of nearing the end of his career. Maybe you get Stephon Tuitt back, and he kind of gets back into
That'd be
form.
great. Yeah, we'll see.
And then you need to go move on, like find a corner. But you have the
Yeah.
two cornerstones of your defense, and in a NFL that is increasingly moving towards a two high, two safety defense, where they are
Yes.
both asked to really cover the whole field. Having a guy like Minka Fitzpatrick that can do that one by himself is
Mhm.
like this is kind of this is the other side of the Jordan Davis coin,
Mhm.
where if you can have that so where with Jordan Davis, where you can have that massive front defensive line defender that can eat blocks and free up the other defenders to make plays, such that you can take guys out of the box and be strong against the pass because he's so strong against the run and he can free up the other defenders. The other side of the coin is that if you have a guy like Minka Fitzpatrick who can be a true center fielder free safety and you are not forced into playing those uh, double too high defense, or at least not present them pre-snap where you can
Right.
do more rotations and stuff because he can cover so much ground. That allows your defense to be more flexible.
Yeah, and like I said, it all comes down to like when you have a player that is uniquely talented at a particular skill, especially if you're talking about safeties, their ability to play center field legitimately. Because there's guys that they're asked to do that, but there's not many guys that are truly sideline to sideline, can cover all aspects of the field and help make up for mistakes, which is what kind of Minka had to do all of last year.
Mhm.
But especially in the run game,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's a whole other story. But he could honestly probably make a case to be considered a linebacker at this point if he wanted to for franchise. It might help with the franchise tag, but it's just when you have a guy that can do something like that, like you said, whether it's like whatever skill you're talking about, like you said, Jordan Davis's calling card or whatever it is, it just makes everything easier. And as a defense, making things easy is about as nice of a thing as you can say about somebody making things easier. So, but
yeah, so we'll move on to kind of the less important deals for
right,
next year's cap. And the two that I'm keeping an eye on are Cam Sutton and Devin Bush.
yeah,
And the Steelers did not pick up Devin Bush's option.
which yeah,
I don't think they have, and I think they still have time to, but they probably won't.
I don't see it because I just don't the they probably assume right that he'll be better, but I doubt he'll be so much better that whatever the fifth year option is going to be low enough that they wouldn't be able to keep him for cheaper on a shorter deal if he
Yeah.
played. So I don't think it makes sense for them to do it. I don't think this is the same situation with Edmonds where I may have liked to have done that with him because he showed improvement in his third year. But yeah, to me, it wouldn't make sense for them to make that decision, even if they do. So
Yeah, and granted, he will still be so young that let's like if he has a great comeback year and figures it out and is playing well next to Miles Jack, I think they can get him a decent deal that pays him well, but it's also not going to break the bank because he's a linebacker and
right,
um
they can make it work.
and
Yeah.
I feel like other teams aren't going to want to take that risk on him. Like they're not going to
No,
shell out like they would for Deontay Johnson.
I don't think so. No.
No. And the other one is Cam Sutton, who signed a 2-year deal last offseason. And he
Yeah.
had a bit of a rough season this year, but it was kind of just because he got put in some bad positions by injuries on the defense. And I think they just like having him because he's so versatile, can play special teams as well. And he's just like a reliable piece that can do a lot of things for you. So again, a guy that might not command much in the open market because I don't think many other teams are going to like want to pay him as a number one corner, but
No.
they could kind of keep bringing him back. And, again, next year they'll have a lot of room to give him money if he's like, listen, like I want to go somewhere else, but if you guys pay me enough, like I'll stay.
Yeah, I just want to see him as much as his versatility is an asset. He's one of those guys where I feel like kind of to a much lesser extent the same problem Minka had in Miami where he could do so many things that it kind of
Mhm.
hurt him
Yeah.
almost. I want to see Sutton just be able to be like the slot corner. Like
Yeah.
I think that's his best role. I think that's where he's most comfortable. So with them bringing back Witherspoon and bringing in, I know I should have had this guy. Why can't I think of his name? I'm losing my mind.
Uh, the guy they brought back or
No,
somebody they brought in?
from the Bills.
Levi
Levi
Wallace.
Wallace. Yep,
Yeah.
there we go. Can never remember. Yeah, Levi Wallace. Bring those two in to play outside primarily.
Mhm.
Obviously, I'm hoping will mean that Sutton will get the majority of the slot snaps, at least especially against if they're trying to guard a true decent receiver in the slot. Otherwise, you might see other guys kind of play there occasionally, but that's what I'm hoping to see from him.
Yeah, I agree. And then so Stephon Tuitt is also a free agent next
Right.
season, and it's just so hard to really predict
Yeah,
how that's going
I
to
don't
get
know.
resolved because it's not clear if he's going to play.
Right.
If he doesn't, I can't imagine they'd pay him. They'd
No.
try to find a way to get out of that deal, and then they just have to kind of move on and figure out something else moving forward. Loki need Chris Boswell is going to be free agent, so they'll need to resign him.
Yeah, they better at least. We'll see,
Yeah, I mean, Grant, they've been, you can find kickers, but aside from that one fluky season, Boswell has just been so reliable.
Yeah,
And he's only 32, so he's got like 8 years left.
Oh yeah, as a kicker, yeah, especially. I
Yeah.
mean, he's one of those kickers. Like as much as that position is pretty interchangeable for a lot of teams, if once you have a guy that's in his level, especially outside of that season, it's you want to keep him for as long as you can.
Yeah, and this is one that I think I'm thinking a little ahead on this one, but I'm wondering if they kind of start to kick the tires on getting an Alex Highsmith extension done.
I would highly consider it
if he has a good season this year, which I think
just
he
to
will.
avoid that, just to avoid the Bud Dupree situation, right?
Yeah,
because like as much as I am perfectly fine letting another team pay as much for Dupree as they did with the Titans, he was a nice piece to have opposite Watt, and having Highsmith there has been really good as well so far, I think, for the most part. So if you can hammer out a really team friendly deal for him, which I think is very possible, even if he plays relatively well, that would be, I think, a really good way just to make sure, because I don't want to have to constantly wonder who the opposite of Watt is going to be.
Yeah.
I'd rather have a guy that, even if he's not spectacular by any means, is going to be able to get the job done and be an actual solid player in his own right on top of having Watt there too. So
Yeah, and I think that he's gonna fly like under the radar enough that
I think so too.
he's not, and that part of that is just because of how good the other players around him are.
Right.
That like
Yeah.
he's not gonna put up these insane stats where it's like, oh wow, like he's gonna get paid soon. Like if he has like an 8 sack or 8 10 sack year, like that's a really good year, but like it's not gonna be like a red alert on the radar of like every other
Right.
NFL team about like, oh, we need to
Yeah.
like get this guy. So
Yeah.
they might like offer him kind of it might be like a nice deal at the time, but he probably should reject it and go to the market. But
Right.
maybe they can swing and
Yeah.
be like, hey, like we really want to have you here for the long term with TJ. So, we give you this deal and you don't have to worry about playing under contract year next year or something like that.
He feels like the kind of guy that would do that for sure.
That's a good,
And
exactly.
the thing that's kind of going against him too a little bit, or the thing I think would help us is as much as I think he's a really good player, he doesn't have like those stupid wow moments that Dupree pulled off
Yeah.
occasionally, where like he had the highlight run.
Yeah. And that's
stuff from,
just
like nowhere.
Dupree being like
A
one of the greatest
supreme
athletes
athlete.
ever. Yeah.
Right, like, he doesn't have, like that's kind of what I think made Dupree kinda pop for certain teams with this and the Titans especially, obviously,
Mhm.
in the end, was, like, he showed these flashes of, like, ridiculousness that
Mhm.
most guys just don't show, whereas
Yeah.
Highsmith is more of a true, like, solid all-around player opposed to that.
The,
So,
the other side of that though is I'm a little worried like this could be like his real breakout year.
it could, I
Like
mean, the
where
way he played when he was
because
healthy
because
is
he's gotten better at like really
every step of the way.
consistently. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering like this year if he really takes a big leap and then we're like, oh
He
crap,
could.
now we
He
have this
could.
again, which isn't the
Yeah, I
worst problem
mean,
to have.
it's not a bad problem. It's just like again, I'd rather not have to
Yes.
wonder who the next guy is going to be opposite of him again. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
exactly. So then looking forward for this offseason, kind of the needs we've talked about this whole time, they really need to fix that strong safety thing. We've talked a lot about that.
Yeah,
We still are big proponents of drafting a wide receiver, probably high,
relatively high.
in the
Yeah,
first 3 rounds at least. Um, I think the interesting thing, and we'll talk about this more next week, but I depending on how the wide receivers fall in the draft, I'm wondering if there are multiple ones available, or I guess it would be better if it was the last one, but if they're able to work out that trade down because some team is really desperate to come up and get their guy before the Pats and the Packers pick.
yeah. Actually, something that'll be coming out sometime tomorrow. I explored some trade down possibilities,
Mhm.
and I do think there's a chance that whether it's the Chiefs or the Packers or somebody like that,
Mhm.
somebody's getting to 19, 20-ish, and they see an opportunity to jump ahead of somebody because even the Packers are 22. Like Patriots could still possibly go receiver. I
Mhm.
mean, they didn't
Oh
make a
yeah.
big trade for one.
Mhm.
Um, like I said, the Chiefs obviously should be in the market for receiver. We'll see if they actually are. It's kind of hard to say at this point whether they're going to just try to formulate with the guys they have or what.
Honestly,
But
I'm kind of out on them as with a receiver in the first round
yeah, it seems like a lot of people are, and
because
I get it.
I think to get one of those guys in that first group, they would probably have to trade up, and I don't think they want to do that.
Yes, I don't
And
think
I
they do
think that
either. But
there will be guys available with their picks in the next 2 rounds that can still be solid players because essentially like, you have your 3 starters in Hardman, Mark Valdez, Scantling, and Juju. Like those are
right.
going to be your guys, and then you also have Kelsey, and you might go 12 personnel a decent bit now. Try to run the ball a little more. So I think because of how like their corner and edge room are really concerning.
It's concerning to say the
So
least. Yeah,
I think that that's where they might go in the first round, and maybe in the second round they come back and get more of a weapon from Mahomes. But
yeah.
especially like, and I don't think that because they got rid of Tyreek Hill, they're just giving up on weapons. But
No,
they've never really invested highly at receiver. If you
no,
think about it,
and really, yeah, they just probably don't feel the need, especially now.
yeah,
Like they have a quarterback that's going to be able to make guys work,
I was
right?
exactly, yeah,
And people could say whatever they want to. Like, there's still people that feel like Tyreek Hill kind of like made Mahomes as good as he is, which is a hilarious thing to say. Like, yeah, Hill is a unique weapon and is
hmm
going to still probably be a unique weapon for a couple years. But you combine that with what Mahomes is able to do, and that's how you get what you saw from Tyreek Hill, right? Like,
hmm
not every team is going to be able to use Hill the
exactly,
way that the way that the Patrick Mahomes is able to use him in that offense, and it's
hmm
not going to be the same with Tua. I don't, that's definitely not going to be the case.
yeah,
So it's definitely they help each other, but I think that they know that they can afford to spend premium picks at higher, more important positions of need, opposed to having to force a receiver pick just to make him happy or anything.
yeah.
So
And then I think corner is interesting. It'll be interesting to track. I think that with the guys they have there now, I think they're ready to ride with that on going into the first week of the
yes,
season, honestly, which is concerning a little bit. But
Yeah,
I think there's a decent chance that it turns out okay, and I think they're going to draft some guy late, uh, in the fourth or sixth round or something. Kind of just try to replace Justin Lane on special teams. Honestly, maybe you can keep both if Lane actually improves for some reason,
for
but
some
I
reason.
don't
Yeah.
think they're looking for that starter this year. I think they're going to wait for that for next year,
Like I think
maybe.
the only way, and I actually this is another pick I made in a mock I did recently, and it was mostly out of the fact that kind of the way the board fell when I was doing simulation, I didn't like a lot of the guys that were there as day one starters
Hmm.
as an impact. So I was looking at who could be a guy that maybe not this year, but the year after or longer might be a huge piece if he works out. And I ended up on Zion McCollum out of Sam Houston State because he's this
In
athletic
which
freak.
round?
It was I had him in the second round, and
Okay, good. I thought you were talking about the
yeah,
first.
no, not in the first.
Okay,
That's what
okay.
the
Second round,
board
I could see.
he fell to the 52, and like a lot of seems like a lot of mock like draft machines don't have him going very early. I think he's going to go a lot earlier than
Hmm.
those mock
Yeah,
drafts are
him and
saying. But
Tariq Woolen are going to go way
yeah,
high.
like Woolen, I think is going to be a guy that goes high and doesn't work out. I
Hmm.
think the McCollum could very well work
Yeah, I
out.
agree with that.
So I had them taking him like that might be the only type of player that could go in the first two rounds if especially if they don't go in the first round if nobody falls to them that they can't help but pass up on. But
Yeah,
it's hard to say with corner because
yeah,
I do think the guys that are there right now are going to be the starters regardless of
yeah.
how they do
And
it.
I could see that. And the other one is that like Andrew Booth seems to be falling because of
He
injury,
does,
and
yeah,
the Steelers are not. I feel like they are one of those teams that will eschew a guy if they have a kind of a big injury problem.
yeah,
Um, and Booth, it's just been really this off season, so maybe it's not that big of a deal. But
no,
sports hernias are weird, and that's
they
kind of the
are,
issue he has. So, and he hasn't tested at all. So, I think that could go either way for them. But I think they will like his tape a lot, so that's a possibility. But
yeah.
again, like that's a really good situation for him because he doesn't have to start day one.
No, he wouldn't have to. I don't think he
So,
would unless he really just shows
and I
up in
mean,
camp and just
if he
beats people
blows
out.
Levi Wallace out of the water,
Right,
I'm thrilled.
right.
Like, yeah,
But
so that's fine with me. But yeah, so and I think then next year, you see how these guys played, and then you evaluate, okay, like now we're either going to, you know, use a high draft pick, or if the season goes well, and you're like, all right, like we're still going to try to ride this out. Maybe you try to make a big splash at signing a corner or something.
yeah, we definitely could. So
Yeah, and then unfortunately, the running back the market is really dried up for signing running backs. Guys that we like
yeah.
Ronald Jones and Marlon Mack have signed elsewhere,
Hmm.
which is frustrating. So I don't know if Steelers are going to try to invest something there in with a meaningful pick. So they might just kind of make Najee
Yeah,
the focal point of the offense again.
I feel
Unfortunately,
like the key point is I feel like if they haven't made a pick by the fourth round, I think that fourth round pick is the pick that should be looked at as like when they might start to consider it, right?
hmm
Like if there's a running back that they really think could make an impact as the number two behind him in year one,
yeah,
I think that they would maybe do that. I was some of the guys like I like the idea of a guy like a Pierre Strong Jr.
hmm
coming in as being the backup because he's so different from
yeah,
Najee, right? Like
hmm
he gives you that speed that we don't really get from Najee. He gives you the quickness that Najee has, but in a different way. He's more of a
hmm
true like open field runner opposed to anything else. So something like that. But I think if they make it past their fourth round pick, I don't know if they would spend one of the late round picks on a guy because I don't think they'd think that they would make an impact day one.
yeah.
But it depends on who's still there. I think.
I think the biggest need, this is more of a 2023 need that
Right.
I don't think they'll focus on this year at all. But I think next year is going to be big, is rebuilding the defensive line because,
Yes. Yeah.
like we said, Tuitt is hitting free agency. He could have a good year if he plays and comes back. We just don't know. But aside from that,
Yeah.
Alawal is also going to be hitting free agency at like 37 years old. Chris Wormley's going to be a free agent. Cam Hayward's going to be another year older.
Yeah.
And, he's still playing great. So, you could
Yeah.
keep
Who
him
knows?
going.
Yeah,
But at that point, you've really got Cam Hayward and Isaiah Loudermilk and like Carlos Davis. So you need
Yeah.
to start kind of restarting that cycle of investing high picks in the defensive line.
I feel like this year I don't see them going with it high
No.
just because it just isn't as big of a need. But the only situation I could see is like maybe if they do trade back in the first round, right? Like they decide they do want to trade back, and a guy like Travis Jones makes it to like the late 20s.
I mean, I think
Maybe
he'd be there.
then,
I think he'd be there, no problem.
yeah, like
I still think he goes second round. I just don't think he makes it to them in the second.
right. He's probably going to go inside of that like
Yeah.
32 to 45 range ish type
Yeah.
something around there. That would be probably the only player that I could see maybe being the guy there. But
Jordan
again,
Davis falls them this year, I'd be interested.
yeah, but I just have a hard time thinking that's going to happen. Like
I
I've seen,
agree, but I think it's possible because like I don't think in those picks before them, I don't think the Eagles or the Saints will take him
no, I don't
because
think
they
so.
don't really need / value that. The Chargers are in there, but they made so many free agency signings that
I mean, it would kind
based
of
on like,
make them really complete,
but I
but
don't, but
still,
like they already have like Sebastian Joseph Day
yes,
and Austin Johnson. Like they already have a good amount of guys there that like, so it would be kind of an overkill point. And for a
true,
team that is going to be more focused on defending the pass, it doesn't make a ton of sense now.
right.
So that's like the one spot. Like, so if like he doesn't go to Baltimore at like 14, he might be there.
It's possible. I think it also depends on, do the Saints move up with those picks, right? Because then the team that gets those picks, maybe depending on who they move up with,
Yeah,
could be a
that's a good
spot for
point.
them too. But I still think the most likely thing that would happen with that is that it would be the Giants moving down from like 5 ahead of the
Yeah,
Panthers.
that's a good point. Yeah.
But if it's the Giants getting those picks, they're not taking Jordan Davis either. So
Listen,
I doubt
I
it at least.
don't. I mean, I know Gettleman's not there
Right?
anymore,
Yeah.
but they like they have Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence, and that's really it on the
True.
defensive line. So like,
Yeah.
if they still want to keep running 3-4, and like Wink Martindale loves him some massive nose
He
tackles.
does. That's true.
So
But
you
yeah.
know,
I just feel like, I mean, for them to do that though, I feel like it'd be so on brand for them to do that, but it would actually maybe not be a bad
it
thing
would
for
be
once.
yeah.
Like it, because again, that would make those top 3 guys in the interior pretty disgusting.
Everybody be praising the
So,
pick, and Dave Gettleman be sitting at home like,
right, like
what the
what,
heck?
I've been doing this
I
for
did.
years.
Nobody
I've been,
liked when I did
I
it.
traded OBJ and got with the first round pick I got for him. I'm like, and yeah, I mean, it's hard to say like whether they would or wouldn't do that, but I do think it's still probably more than likely they'd attack other things. But
Yeah.
it's it's possible, but it just feels to me like if someone doesn't take him way too early, like someone just jumps on him way too early and we just don't see it coming,
Mhm.
someone will find a way to go up and like get him, or something will happen there. So
Yeah,
we'll see
so
though.
rebuilding that defensive line, and then obviously franchise quarterback is kind of the priority number one for this year, and I think more so next year. I really hope more so next year,
Me
but
too.
I
Yeah.
still think they're probably going to invest one of their first 2 picks in a
I
quarterback.
can't wait to be at my friends, which is where I'm going to be for the draft, and talking about how we took like Desmond Ritter at like whatever pick if we trade down, or to keep him at 20, and complain about
If
it.
we trade down from him, I'm fine with it.
I'm still, until I see
Because
him.
you're gonna
Yeah,
pick up multiple day 2 picks regardless, so I'm
that's
fine with it.
true. Yeah, I guess, but like, he'll be one of those guys that if we were to take, I will not say anything good about him until he proves otherwise.
Yeah,
That's just
fair
how I'm
enough.
gonna be. But yeah, we'll. I still, it's just hard to shake that feeling they're gonna go quarterback, and like I'm hoping that
Yeah.
we're wrong about that. But man, if they're not taking one, or they're at least not planning to take one, they are putting on the biggest show possible in order to make people think so.
As I said, I'm sure I've said on this show, but I love being wrong, and this is one of those
Right.
times where I would really, really love to be
I'm
wrong.
more than happy to be wrong about a lot of stuff that we're concerned they may do
Yeah.
this year. So
All right, that's
we'll
gonna do it
see.
for us for
Yep.
this week. We'll be back next week with our draft preview. We'll go through kind of our dreams and nightmares, shout out Meek Mill scenarios for each
Oh yeah.
round, and see like what we think will happen, what we are scared will happen, and what we would
Yes.
love for it to happen. But in the meantime, Shane, let people know where they can find you and your work.
So I'm at Shane Kubis on Twitter, like always, and just watch out for at Steelers ATV as well. Just going to try to have some more stuff. I did just recently put something out about kind of the Steelers win now mentality, and is that going to be tested now that the AFC is so stacked? Definitely check that out. But other than that, just kind of look out for any streams we're going to be doing. A lot of stuff coming after the draft as well.
Absolutely. You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. Make sure you're following Around the Block on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, following us on Twitter, as we said. And yeah, we'll have I think I'll be trying to get a mock draft out on Around the Block this week, which would be my
right.
first. Gonna try to keep it what I think is realistically going to happen. Not going to be trying to go
So
too off the
predictive.
rails.
Yeah, predictive.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
more so predictive as opposed to just blathering my own thoughts on the internet, which that's what this is for.
I mean, this is what we do, right? I mean,
yeah,
so,
exactly.
But
All right. Thank you guys for listening. We hope to have you back next time.